Okay, so this is a revision video on structure of the plasma membrane. So remember that this is really important information because it's not just the cell surface membrane that this relates to, but it's the membranes of all the membrane-bound organelles, and there are many of those that you'll be familiar with, including the nuclear envelope, mitochondria, smooth and rough endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus. So there's many membrane-bound organelles in a eukaryotic cell, and they all have this basic structure. So the revision task is to draw a plasma membrane, including a sketch of the 5 main components, and then for those 5 main components I want you to list their functions. So there's actually a lot to remember for this. So pause, test yourself, and then you can check your answer. So let's go through what you should have had. First thing, phospholipids. So these form the main component of a plasma membrane, and they form something called a bilayer. Remember, the polar phosphate group head faces outwards towards a water-based solution, and the hydrophobic fatty acid tails face inwards towards each other, forming this bilayer. And the function of the phospholipids are these. So the next component we're going to list is another lipid, and that is cholesterol. So cholesterol is embedded within the membrane because it's a lipid. It's soluble within the lipid part of the membrane, and it has these functions. So next, if you've drawn something like this, that will be a glycolipid. Glycolipids are carbohydrates bonded to lipids. So the lipid portion is within the membrane, and then the carbohydrate portion, which is obviously hydrophilic, is on the outside of the membrane, extending out. And the functions of glycolipids are these. Next, something like this will represent glycoproteins. So this is a carbohydrate bonded to a protein. So the protein sits embedded in the membrane, and that will have a lot of hydrophobic or amino acids with hydrophobic side chains, so that it's able to sit within the lipid portion of the membrane. And then again, the carbohydrate, as with the glycolipid, is outside. It's hydrophilic, so it's in the water portion of the surrounding solution. And the function of glycolipids, so hopefully you recognise one important function from the immune system topic, self-antigens. Okay, so let's just extend the membrane a bit more so we can fit in the next thing, which has a lot of functions. So we'll extend that bilayer along, and then we're going to deal with proteins. So I'm going to just deal with a few functions just by animation, and then I will give you the written function. So one function is to serve as a channel protein. So the red circle represents an ion, for instance a sodium ion, and provides a channel for it to diffuse through the membrane. The grey box to the right represents another protein that can sit embedded within the membrane, and I'll go through functions in a moment. So that will have probably a structural function. We've got in purple here extrinsic proteins that are associated with glycolipids, and then another form of transport protein is a carrier protein, and this will transport specific molecules across the membrane. So for instance, if this was a glucose molecule, it may bind to the carrier protein. That causes the carrier protein to change shape so that the glucose molecule can diffuse across the membrane. And this, of course, is not just diffusion, or what we'd say facilitated diffusion, but also active transport and potentially co-transport, but there would be two molecules obviously moving through in co-transport. So let's just clarify what proteins do. So obviously we've discussed proteins there and their functions. Okay, so very well done if you managed to remember all of those components and those functions. There's quite a bit to remember there. If you didn't get everything, then obviously play this back, test yourself again, and continue to do that until you're getting all of those things correct and that you're remembering it.